All right, so Nancy Pelosi, the corrupted ghoul from San Francisco, a millionaire landlord and an enemy of the working class if there ever was one, decided to come out and give her take on the current state of the Republican Party and what she would like to see from the future of the Republican Party. And listen, if you watch my videos, then I'm going to go ahead and anticipate that most of you guys are already aware of my position on Nancy Pelosi and who she is. Again, I think she is an entirely corrupted ghoul who doesn't represent the interests of average Americans. She represents corporate America through and through, and so it shouldn't be that surprising that she would want something like a strong Republican Party, as she says in this clip. So let's go ahead and watch this, and then I'll give you more of my thoughts on it.
And I say to my Republican friends, take back your party. The country needs a big, strong Republican Party. Here I say that as a leader in the Democratic Party, but we need a big, strong Republican Party. You've done so much for our country. Take pride and take back your party. Don't have it be a cult of personality on the extreme right. This isn't about liberal or conservative. It's about radical, should we say, they don't believe in governance. So you see, for example, with COVID, if science says we should be wearing masks and government says you must wear a mask inside, they'll say we're anti-science, we don't believe the science to begin with, and we certainly are not going to obey the governance that requires that. That's one example. Of course, we go through this with climate change and so many other areas of denial that they're in. So, again, as nonpartisan as I can be, take back the Republican Party. I'm not a Republican here. Take back your party, which has done so much for our country.
Okay, done so much like what? I mean, like specifically, I would like for one person to ask her a follow-up question. First of all, this is not the only time that Nancy Pelosi has said we need a strong Republican Party. She has been saying this repeatedly throughout the Trump years at least, and I'm sure she said it even before then, but this is something she has been consistently saying. Again, this is the leader of the Democratic Party, not the Republican Party, which, you know, I know it can be hard to separate the two because frequently they are on the same sides, especially when it comes to corporatism and representing the interests of big corporations and billionaires, or if it's on militarism or other points of common interest between the parties like that. But this is the leader of the Democratic Party who is saying we need a strong Republican Party. And what is she hearkening back to? Well, she's hearkening back to the good old days before Donald Trump came in and sort of blew up their whole two-party, one-party duopoly that we have going on here, where they were basically status quo managers. And that's exactly what Nancy Pelosi actually is, right? This entire situation and why she would say something like this makes a lot more sense when you understand what her job actually is as the leader of the Democratic Party in the House, okay? Her and Chuck Schumer are put in those positions, those leadership positions, not because they're some, like, you know, bright and bold, inspiring leaders, or because they're really good at getting the Democratic Party agenda passed. They're actually in there for basically the opposite reason. They are there as status quo managers. That's exactly what Chuck Schumer is doing. That's exactly what Nancy Pelosi is doing. And really, that's exactly what Joe Biden is doing. Now, they put forward some good pieces of legislation, right? Nancy Pelosi passed a $15 minimum wage through the House. It didn't get passed through the Senate, obviously, but she has passed through and allowed through some pieces of good legislation. But overall, the entire trio of the Democratic establishment in the White House, in the Senate, and the House right now, they control the entire government, okay? So if somebody like Nancy Pelosi wanted to push through something like a $15 minimum wage or any of the other actual progressive pieces of legislation that we have, they could do it. They could do it in a coordinated fashion. But the reality of the situation is you have a coordinated Democratic establishment that is really coordinated only in maintaining the status quo for the military-industrial complex, for the defense contractors, for the billionaire class, for the corporations. And you see that emblematic in the types of policies that are happening right now. We see as this $3.5 trillion budget resolution package is being made at the moment. We see perfect examples of things like the ratchet effect, as Democrats have proposed raising the corporate tax rate, not to what it was under the Obama years before the Trump tax cuts in 2017, but only about halfway between where the Obama corporate tax rate was and where Trump cut it below. So the rate under Obama was a 35% corporate tax rate. Trump lowers it down to 21%, and Democrats don't even want to bring it back up to 35%. They're proposing right now that we raise it back up to about 26%. So it's just one example, but you see this across the board, right? You see this when Democrats like Nancy Pelosi don't even bat an eye. when they support inflated military budgets. You see it when they don't even bat an eye in giving billions of dollars more aid to Israel and Saudi Arabia and many other countries that go and just commit widespread human rights abuses. They don't care about actual progressive policies. They don't fight for actual progressive policies. They only fight in this very narrow range where they actually agree with Republicans. And so that's why they want a strong Republican Party, so they have an excuse to not actually pass their agenda, but to instead pass essentially a Republican agenda, which is what she actually overwhelmingly agrees with. So that's the actual dynamic of what is going on right now and why Nancy Pelosi would come out and say something this stupid. If I was the leader of the Democratic Party and wanted to separate myself from the Republican Party, I would be saying the opposite of this. I would be saying I am glad that the Republican Party is self-imploding, and we should be taking advantage of that. We should be capitalizing on that and using the fact that we control the House, the Senate, and the White House to pass through as big and bold an agenda as possible that materially affects the lives of working class Americans specifically, but all Americans across the board. Maybe you could be doing something like passing a Medicare for all. Maybe you could be passing the PRO Act. Maybe you could be passing all sorts of legislation, legal marijuana, that would actually improve people's lives, change people's material conditions, and actually win over support from the Republican Party in that way, instead of just trying to advocate for the Republican Party and telling people, oh no, they're salvageable, oh no, this great Republican threat that I call fascist party all the time is actually good and redeemable. Now, what is she actually hearkening back to? So she talks about going back to the good old days. To what? George W. fucking Bush? Who are you specifically talking about? The other Bush? Are you talking about Ronald Reagan? I mean, all these people represent the same conservative neoliberal ideology that she represents, right? And so it's not like a confusion. All of these establishment politicians who want to be status quo managers want to go back to the days where, you know, Republicans like George W. Bush, who weren't as loudmouth and openly, brazenly stupid about basically portraying their corrupt agenda to the American people. They don't like that Trump is an open and loose mouthpiece for the establishment. They hate that. And so basically they would want to go back to the days of a Ronald Reagan or a George W. Bush, who they are able to work across the aisle with on the endless militarism, on the endless corporatism. So that's what's actually going on here. And just to give you one small picture of something recent that happened that I covered in a different story, but just to show you the corruption, okay? Again, Nancy Pelosi is a 100 millionaire. She's worth over $100 million. She has many real estate holdings. She is a landlord. And in addition to that, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband cashed in on big tech just as Congress was set to pounce. So she does stuff like this. She's basically an insider trading status quo manager. But just again, that's just to give you a perspective on who exactly Nancy Pelosi is and what she is actually doing in her time in office, okay? She's made millions and millions of dollars, and just somehow magically all of these members of Congress are outperforming the average stock market and tend to make a bunch of money when they get into Congress and when they leave Congress, when they go and join into the companies that basically funneled money into their entire careers throughout their careers in the Senate and in the House and wherever they may be. So that's why Nancy Pelosi is basically willing to go and fight for a strong Republican Party. It's because she needs a strong Republican Party. We don't need a strong Republican Party. The American people don't need or want a strong Republican Party. They are the enemy of the working class, but it just so happens that Nancy Pelosi is also an enemy of the working class and needs that strong Republican Party so that she has a scapegoat to not actually pass the agenda that the American people overwhelmingly want her to pass.